Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome today to Business Insights and the next live stream that we've got here. And we've got a great panel lined up for you. We're looking at business, risk and resilience. And it's being chaired for us today by Steve Gardner-Collins from Visit Gloucestershire. Steve, just tell us a little bit about what we've got lined up in the next hour or so.
Yeah, hi Pete, good afternoon. Every sector, every business, positives and negatives, everybody's been affected over the last year. Are there any silver linings is kind of a big question. How can we prepare, be resilient, and what does the future hold for everybody?
And it certainly has been a really difficult year for everybody. And since we've been doing this on the Business Insights as well as the Gloucestershire Business Show for the last year, we've made some fantastic international partners, and it's become really, I mean, we know what's going on in India at the moment. We know what's going on across the world. And if you think about the businesses sitting into those scenarios, it's really tough. Now, one of your panel members is Eva, who joins us from Gloucestershire, but in a slightly longer term, joins us from Spain a while ago. And I know you're still very well connected into that international scene. So compared with what we're seeing in Gloucestershire and what we're seeing in the UK, how does it sit in the rest of the world and your homelands of Spain?
Yeah. Hi, everyone, and thanks very much for inviting me, Steve and Pete. Yes, so it's been really interesting seeing the differences between how the British and the Spanish have embraced things like online shopping, for example, and even the restrictions in each country, and just understanding what's the culture behind those type of restrictions. So yeah, it's been really interesting. Yeah,
I'm sure we'll get a touch of that global thing as we go as well. Yes. But really looking forward to this. Steve, over to you. Take it away.
Great. Thanks, Pete. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Gardner-Collins. I'm Sales Director of the Hatton Collection, and I'm also Director of Visit Gloucestershire. I'd like to introduce my panel, who are going to talk about business, risk and resilience for the next hour. I'll start with Zoe. Like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, I'm Zoe Darlington. I run a business called Pure Improvement. We help manufacturing and engineering businesses become leaner and greener. So I help them to improve operational efficiency and become more resilient for business growth and also for sustainability, environmental sustainability. Thank you.
Great, thanks Zoe. Roger, over to you.
Oh, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Steve. My name is Roger McCrill from a company called Sabre UK. We deal internationally with assisting companies to look for international markets in the US, in China, in India, and parts of Asia. We guide them through the process from start to finish. And obviously, we've seen some remarkable changes through this COVID situation.
Thanks, Roger. Eva, over to you.
Hi, I'm Eva Túnez Salvador, and I'm the Director of Genuine Translations, a multilingual translation company based in Cheltenham. I'm also the co-founder of Local to Global, and it's a one-stop gateway to fulfill the exporters' needs in terms of translation, cultural training, and branding when they are entering new markets.
Great, thanks. Guy.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. My name's Guy Timson. I run a company called Channel Force, which basically is email lead generation, bringing you closer to your new customers. And also am the sponsorship director of the Bristol International Balloon Fiesta, which has had a fluctuating last couple of years, to put it mildly.
Thanks, Guy. And joining us today virtually is Nolene. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Steve. I'm Nolene Mariapin. I'm the founder of Safa Global, which is a consulting company which focuses on supporting businesses with strategy and operations, and very much focused on the sustainability arena. So looking at impact, ESG's impact measurement and reporting, and how companies can basically build and leverage their sustainability profile for profitability.
Great, thanks Nolene, and thanks for joining us. So for the panel today, we're looking to discuss, is COVID in the past? Is it dictating our future, or are we currently in a situation where we're trying to plan our businesses and reopen our businesses, and what are the risks and how do we become resilient? So to open up the discussion, our first kind of subject is around, has COVID changed the way we do business? Can we take it day by day, week by week, or month by month? It'd be interesting to get a perspective from around the panel. So Guy, that question to you, has COVID changed the way we do business?
I think by the very nature of everything that's happened, it's definitely changed it. A lot of the way that we're doing business in an interpersonal fashion. This is the first time that I've been to a public meeting like this in a bit over a year, apart from one networking event last summer when we had a little break. And a lot of people have got the same situation. It's been mirrored across many, many different industries. Lots of industries have had to close and then reopen and close and reopen, but all the various different staffing issues there. So I think it's changed, not necessarily for the better in some instances. I think it's changed for the better in some instances as well. I think people have become more efficient because of this. But I think moving forward, it depends which industries are going to be able to change back and to what extent they're going to be able to change back to the way they were before.
Great, thanks, Guy. And again, there's this Build Back Better program, this hope for a kind of a brighter future for businesses. So taking that also into consideration, Ava, what's your perspective on, has COVID changed the way we do business?
Yes, definitely. I'm hoping for better in many cases. Obviously, it changes between industries, like Guy said. But I think it's the way people have reacted to it and adapted their services or the products, the way they do business. So yeah, it has changed every business, I think, but some have been more innovative in the way they've adapted, and I think that's what we need to take from this.
Yeah, and I guess to a certain extent, with being able to adapt, there's that subject of silver lining. Some businesses were able to turn attention to different ways of doing business kind of overnight, turning gins distilleries into hand sanitization manufacturing plants and all sorts. Roger, has COVID changed the way we do business?
Oh, substantially, I think. I think there's been a totally different view of how business can operate under these conditions. I think it's put some businesses at very high risk, and I think, as Guy said, many have actually gone out of business. We'll see, of course, as time progresses, how that effect continues. But I think in terms of changing business, today is my second day of meeting people face to face for nearly a year. On the international trade front, and international business front, it's over 2 years since we had any international customers and clients talking to us face to face, either in their country or in the UK. It's brought us to operate more efficiently. It's brought a cultural change in business thinking in many respects. And it's brought a situation where relationships are being built in a different way. The eye-to-eye contact is on Zoom, Voom, and Skype, but it's still there. Signing final contracts, it's yet to be seen how that's going to progress, because that's normally a face-to-face arrangement. But change it has. I think it's probably good for the future, because it's improved a lot of companies' efficiency in the way they work. How it's going to improve the employee relationships and how you manage your people in the long term, we'll have to wait and see. It's also brought a lot of risks in business, financial risks, which hopefully can be minimized over time.
Thanks, Roger. Zoe, how's business changed in your sector? How's COVID affected it?
Yeah, substantially, particularly in the manufacturing industry. I think engineering and manufacturing output dropped by about 40% last year. And I think the whole industry was absolutely shaken by this. So that obviously, created quite significant problems, and then following on from that, you're looking at an uncertain supply chain, and how do you manage demand when you don't know what your demand is? How do you manage your capacity? And it's been very, very tricky for a lot of businesses, and a lot of businesses are seeking help, and although they've been shell shocked, they're really looking at better ways to improve. How can they become more flexible? How can they balance their capacity? How can they improve their processes and become leaner and more efficient and reduce costs? And so we're starting to see businesses, the ones that are surviving, they're going to be more adaptable. And I think that there is that silver lining. Even though they've had a really tough time, businesses are going to come out stronger from this. I truly believe that. So.
Or some inner strength coming out in the future, hopefully. Nolene, same question to you, but I'll slightly lengthen it by saying, from a sustainability perspective, has COVID changed the way we do business, and do we need a longer term plan? And in the sense, do we need to plan now? How does that affect our sustainable outlook? Because we're still in the thick of it. We're reopening this week, aren't we? So, what's your perspective on the situation at the moment?
Yeah, so, agree with comments made by everyone. And yes, businesses absolutely have been affected in numerous ways, the obvious ways of just this disruption to supply, uncertainty around demand. But what it has also allowed to happen, and this has come in with this shift to so much moving online, is that it's shifted focus to areas of technology which had been not as important and not really at the forefront for numerous years. So we're seeing more and more businesses look at things like blockchain, smart contracts. You're seeing so much more around that. There's a lot more of a focus around environmental and social impact. A year and a half ago, you'd see posts come up every now and then on feeds, and now almost every day there is something new that's come up around the different funders, how much more is becoming impact funding related, how many more organizations have to start looking at their sustainability strategies and the impact that they're having, and not just having those strategies in place, but being able to report on them. So I think absolutely, the landscape has shifted significantly. Businesses have had to adapt and innovate. Zoe, absolutely right. The businesses that have survived will definitely come out stronger for it, because they are thinking in a more adaptable way. They're looking at how they pivot. They're considering what, more are thinking about the rainy days. I think for a long time, there were no rainy day funds or no planning or preparation for, what if the worst happens? And it was very much based on, forecasts of, the next 6 months, and perhaps based on what happened in the last 6 months. And what has happened is that the world now sees that we cannot afford to think in that way anymore. We have to think wider, and we have to think more widely than our immediate context. Also taking into account the global, because we see now more than ever the interdependencies between countries and markets and how that affects us locally.
Thanks, Nolene. Yeah, you touched on a really good couple of points there around influence, and almost we're all connected through this process. And I was just thinking around how powerful social media. If you think at the moment when you log on to your LinkedIn, everybody is trying to help everybody, whether it's from a business perspective on funding, or whether it's a shoulder to lean on. You've got mental health and well-being in there. And I guess that shoulder to shoulder experience is what's leading the way on this kind of partnership and collaborative working. Would you say that that's another approach to the sustainable outlook? We talked about collaboration and partnerships before.
Absolutely, yes. I think more and more people are looking at resource, not just in terms of funding and financing, but in terms of strategic partnerships, and how they can fill gaps through developing these collaborations. And it's just become so much easier to do that because more people are open to it, considering what the last year has been like, and that everything's happening online. People who, purely wanted to have meetings face to face a year and a half ago now, having them online is just the norm and is acceptable. So I think the partnerships and collaborations absolutely going to be key for the way forward. I think businesses who are struggling, who feel like they're teetering on the edge, may not be able to pull through, partnerships absolutely can be a saving grace. Looking at interdependence, not just for the emotional support, but also for business survival support, and finding those strategic partners who can support in terms of not just impact, but getting through the next month or few months, developing new strategies around collaborations, can actually adding value. So, adding value to your offer through strategic partnerships and networks is key.
Great, thanks. Guy, we're sat here today, we're talking about risk and resilience, and in effect we could be influencing decisions that people are making. They're sat there, they own their own business. How flexible, when we're talking about partnership working and collaboration, how flexible do you think we need to be in order to kind of survive the risks at the moment?
I think it's breaking it down into chunks of decision making. When we were planning this meeting, we were talking about the short and medium and long term side of things and the effects there. And I guess with some businesses these days, it's about the short term side of things, getting your business back up and running, getting your staff back to work, getting them off furlough, getting them retrained sometimes in certain industries where they haven't actually done their jobs for over a year. Then the medium term, sorting out your business and how you're going to be doing business moving forward over the next short while, and then putting the longer term goals into place as well. Because there's been, and this is one thing that we alluded to on an international trade this morning, there's a great deal of uncertainty. So it's really uncertain to be able to plan in the long term. I think one point I'd make as well, which kind of like follows on what Nolene was saying, is that you've got to be really pragmatic. There's a point at which you say, okay, well, this isn't working. I need to look at a different partnership, or I need to look at a different way of doing things, or I need to look at not doing what my business is doing at the moment. And it's difficult to do that when you're trying to make it survive as well. So it's, but everything that I've just said is kind of slightly confusing anyway, because it is a slightly confusing world we're living in anyway, because you never know whether to just do the short-term bit, then move on to the middle, and then, or do I hop to the long-term part and then hopefully the middle will take care of it? It's just mind-bogglingly confusing for some businesses.
Yeah, I think certainty certainly is something that everybody wants to thrive on. We all will thrive on certainty, and at the moment this uncertain outlook is not helping us. Ava, you run your own business, so how have you found the way you work? Have you had to adapt and be flexible and consider partnerships and collaborations in order to survive over the last year and the outlook ahead?
Yeah, so because of the type of work I do, which is essentially translation, and it's all done online, nothing much has changed. I do work with my clients and suppliers online, and I just need my laptop. But what has been key for my business and also for my mental health has been the partnerships. And I've been really lucky to find someone I can partner with and create a project together, which is local to global. And it's been really fantastic just having someone that you can be, that you can have some sort of accountability and just, have fun in the way as well.
Great, thanks. Roger, international. When we think about other countries, the stages at which the UK is at, and we've got business owners that are adapting and working collaboratively and in partnership, and there are relationships that you can have with success abroad to help you survive now. What's your perspective on that kind of flexible work in that adapting, but also accounting for those really important international relationships that could help your business if you're trading abroad?
Yeah, I think the first thing to realize, of course, everyone's at a different stage. I mean, we were talking with India this morning, and that is, India is in a terrible state. It's in a state worse than we've seen here for probably, 9 months? And they are so uncertain in the way they're thinking about moving forward. They're fundamentally in the survival mode, although most of the plants are closed down. You go to China, of course, you've got a different situation. China is now open and running well. So you have it across the globe, you have different aspects of where the businesses you're dealing with are in terms of their mode of moving forward out of the crisis. So when you talk to clients in India, you really are looking at how to support them and how to suggest and how to bring about relationships that will enable them to survive. When you talk to people in the Chinese markets, you're really talking about how do we now start moving things forward? What provisions have you made to ensure that if this were to move in a downward direction again, how sustainable is your business? What are the key elements that you're working on? And that's particularly true on supply chains. For example, coming out of India now, the supply chains are extremely difficult. Coming out of China, they are easier. The in-between bit, of course, is that there's a shipping and logistics section. A lot of that section is run by Indians. And the fact is that those Indians aren't being allowed to land in the countries where the COVID virus is now apparently under control. Getting over that, partnerships has been a way of bringing about a better route to market for those companies. And basically those partnerships, we've developed some relationships between India, the US and Europe, and relationships between China, India and the US. And those seem to be smoothing things out. But I think there is a significant amount of work to be done in terms of the short term. As Guy said, we've got a short-term view and the company's looking at short-term views. But it's getting them also to realize that that medium term needs to be on the table now. It's not going to be far away before it starts to come to the surface. And if you don't do that, then the risk on your business is significant. So looking at the way you employ the labor, whether you retrain them or bring them back, both in this country and in India. The retraining has been done a lot in China. Innovation has been a key in developing those businesses. We've seen in China significant innovation in AI and systemization of their businesses compared to where they were 12 months ago.
Thanks, Roger. Yeah, technology was brought up earlier, actually, wasn't it, in terms of that resilience, that Build Back Better program. And I think that there is a definite focus on change within the business community, that digital and technology has got to be invested in quite heavily in order to protect us for the future. Zoe, back over to you, I guess, from an international perspective and within manufacturing, there's a big dovetail there in terms of how it all operates. So what's been the impacts on the kind of flexible side of it and being able to adapt, collaborate and partnership to make it a success again?
Yeah, a lot of businesses now are having to look at collaborations. I mean, even myself, from a personal experience, I'm a consultant, and when the whole COVID thing happened, I've got 2 small children, so I really had to then I had to do the homeschooling, so everything came to a stop. And I've started to look at collaborations with other people. So it's helping me to grow my business and for my business to get stronger. And I'm able to offer more to my clients. So that's where I'm taking it. But with my clients and in the manufacturing industry, you find that, they're actually, from a risk and resilience point of view, I think one of the key things, apart from supply chain and the demand, is people. And they've realised that they need to become more flexible, and the workforce needs to become more flexible. And how do you adapt and keep a workforce that, for example, during COVID, a lot of the workforce was sent home. So unless they were actually on the production line, the workforce would be sent home, and they would be, talking via Zoom. When in the engineering and manufacturing industry, it's used to people being on the floor, talking, getting down onto the shop floor, holding meetings, holding stand-up meetings. And then a lot of my clients are just found themselves in this situation where it just doesn't work anymore. It's okay, you have a production line running, but once something goes wrong, you're so reliant on those people that are in the offices, the people who do the planning, the people who do the purchasing, the people who do the sales. the whole support processes behind them, and how, you know, how do you get that to work? Because we're so used to the situation where we have these corridor conversations, we go over to somebody else's desk, and it's trying to create a different way of working, and that's a real challenge within probably most industries, but particularly in the manufacturing industries, where you're used to big factories and people walking around and talking to each other and using stand-up meetings and whatnot, and you're having to then try to create that via Zoom meetings. It's very difficult. So we're having to come up with new ways of doing things and new ways to have meetings and discussions that then take away that, you know, that they're not formal Zoom meetings necessarily, but a lot of businesses are coming up with like informal coffee hours. So they'll have their coffee shops via Zoom. So you can just pop in and it's coffee time. Let's go and have a chat, and coming up with ideas like that will help businesses and help people connect. Because I think that's been the most difficult thing. It's the connection between people, trying to overcome that, because it's different, because we don't always, you know, formal meetings are one thing, but most of our communication is not done through formal meetings. It's, you know, it's through face-to-face and phone calls and, you know, walking over to people. So
somebody passed a comment actually the other day to me about, you know, when you're in the office and somebody comes over to you and you're having a conversation and they're perhaps struggling with a project, and they say something to you and you offered the help, or would you like to get involved? And it's missing out on those opportunities when you are in the office, when you don't have that people-to-people contact.
It's that bouncing off people. I've worked in continuous improvement, and you bounce off, you know, you have to bounce off people, and that's the most difficult thing to sort of to overcome, is how do you get those communications, those conversations going, where you just come up with an idea and then you talk to this person and that person and you bounce it off people, and it's quite difficult.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Guy, your perspective then on people.
Yeah, it's the informal business that's done within a working environment, which is key.
Yeah.
It is. It's the stop by the desk. It's the tap on the shoulder. Yeah. It's the, I've got a bit of an issue with this and I don't want it to become a problem. Excuse me. So it's that type of thing that you don't get, because as soon as there's any sort of direct virtual contact, then you're in a more formal setting than you would be. And you feel like, right, okay, we've got to systemize this, we've got to break it down, we've also got to have action points afterwards. That doesn't happen an awful lot of time in business. You just think, that's a really great idea, I'll go away now. You might present that on to other people as some of your thinking, but someone else has contributed to it. So it's the thing that is, it's very sad that it's not there at the moment. It's very, very difficult to replicate.
Thanks, Guy. Nolene, you actually mentioned when we were planning the session about people and how important people are as your assets. Again,
yes.
About the outlook of resilience. We've talked about team and how we perhaps manage our teams going forward. Your thoughts on people in the workplace?
Yeah, so absolutely right. You know, this has been a critical area for businesses to really look at. There's been so much of a focus on the technology and, you know, building up the technology to facilitate ongoing business operations. But there is so much that is then lost because the people within the organization are the ones who come up with solutions, who come up with innovative ideas, who come up with ways for you to pivot. And when that creativity and the motivation and just the engagement is lacking, that doesn't happen anymore. So I think more and more businesses have to really start focusing on how do they continue to foster these social relationships, you know, the relationships which aren't necessarily just out at a pub or boardroom meetings, but the in-between, like everyone says, you know, the corridor conversations, the tap on the shoulder, the bouncing ideas off each other, or just approaching someone, you know, just standing at a desk talking about something you're having an issue with. So how is that fostered? And sometimes it is about actually creating a space for that where it's it differently. You know, it's not a Zoom meeting, it's a virtual coffee. You're just allocating time for people to catch up, even if it is online. I know, you know, a lot is opening up now in the UK, but that's not the case when you're working internationally. And in, you know, some places, businesses have decided, because they have been able to continue working, you know, or they have been able to just about get by working remotely. Some businesses have decided that they're cutting back on physical space, and that they are going to have more people working from home. And this is going to continue to pose challenges, which I think, you know, some expect, but some are you know, denying the reality of it. So I think businesses are going to have to focus more on their teams. They're going to have to focus more on training, development, and support, not just of specifics around, you know, certain elements of roles, but on things like business resiliency, you know, professional resiliency, how you adapt, looking at social dimensions of business remotely, and building up a spirit of, you know, innovation and people having ownership of the companies that they're working in and the success of those companies. So I think we're really going to have to focus on that moving forward, and having more of, you know, placing more value on that human resource.
Thanks, Nolene. And yeah, I guess absolutely, when it comes to people, there's an element there of investment that's needed, and that feeds us nicely onto the topic of finances. For sectors like mine, the visitor economy, the guy mentioned furlough earlier, and actually for businesses that are opening up, if they opened up on the 12th of April, they've had one heck of a month with the weather, and then they're reopening on the 17th of May, and we're all indoors but semi-restricted on space still. So we're, as a business, really trying to think about ways in which we can invest in our people, but we're really limited on resource right now. And depending on the way the summer goes and social distancing, we're still going to remain limited on resource. And I guess bringing it back to the panel in the room, it's a case of how do we shoulder the balance of financial security from a risk perspective and build resilience with our team and with our environment if sectors like visitor economy, manufacturing, things have grinded to a halt. No money's come in for months. How do we build resilience financially? Ava, your thoughts on that?
I think first and foremost will be an open conversation with your employees, for example. Sometimes less is more, so it's the little things that you do with them to promote that relationship that might help in the short term. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any other idea.
Sorry, Roger. I actually put my phone on silent and it's still on vibrate, and I don't know how it keeps defaulting. I don't know who keeps ringing. Yeah, Roger, financial security and the future.
I think we're going to see that businesses are going to get smaller before they start to grow again. I think many companies are, when people come back in the UK from furlough, they're going to see a remarkable difference in the cost base of their business. And I think the situation is that companies probably will start to draw a situation where they shrink before they grow. Having said that, they've got to bring about their earnings to actually support the loans they have as well. So it's a dilemma that from the point of view of the companies, obviously planning as to how you're going to move your business from high risk, which is probably where we are now, to medium, low risk, and then start a resilience approach. In terms of manufacturing, there is a significant risk because of the capacity constraints that have been put on businesses. Many businesses' outputs are, as you said, I think are about 40% less than they were, or 40% of what they were last year. And that has created a significant cost imbalance. I think the other side of it, of course, that cost imbalance is being passed sometimes on to the consumer. So we're actually seeing costs going up. So we've got a dilemma that those costs are going up, world costs are going up in terms of raw materials. and you put that on top of this, the financial burden on companies is going to be extreme. And therefore, good planning and good governance of a company is going to be crucial in terms of survival in the short term, I guess.
Yeah, Guy, we've had government grants, job retention scheme, similar question in terms of building resilience, but with no in, where does the out come in, and how do you kind of plan for the future?
Within a business context, you have to plan with having some really serious conversations with your employees and treating them as mature adults. Because I think a lot of people have to realize that their workforce knows what's going on. You know, they read the papers, they watch the news. They know that, for instance, yesterday, inflation has doubled in the last month and a half as well. So they know that costs are going up all the time. And they also know that furlough in certain circumstances has just been a temporary put off of redundancy, of, you know, having to make some serious choices about who stays within a business and who goes from a business. And that's just being realistically pragmatic. So the thing is, an awful lot of your employees, the only thing that, again, we're talking about certainty, the only thing that they're certain of at the moment is the fact that there's some furlough there for a little while. Beyond that, you have to start communicating with them. And this, from an HR point of view, is absolutely key as well. Making sure that they realize that 3-6 months down the line, the future is uncertain in certain sectors. In other sectors, it's a case of, okay, well, you may well be doing this many hours because we're only running this many shifts. It could well be that you're doing 2 days instead of 4 because we don't want to get rid of staff. We just want to put people on different contracts. Not 0 hours necessarily, but we just want to put people on different contracts. So it's really varied all the way across, but the mature conversations is the best approach to keep people in the loop.
Yeah, I guess coming back to people and product, we need some financial security to buy the necessary products to be able to put on the production line. So we need some money in the bank to be able to buy and purchase. It comes back to supply chain as well. But from that financial security, how do we build resilience? So if we can't afford the products to go on the production line.
Yeah, I think to start with, businesses need to look at the costs and get a real tight handle on the costs and what is going out of that account every month. Some of the costs are going to be much more variable, and you're going to, particularly when it comes to the supply chain at the moment, businesses are struggling to get the supply of the parts that they need, and also the costs. The costs are out of control, so they don't know how much they're going to be paying for those parts. So there's those pressures, but then there's the costs that they can control. So it's looking very closely at what you can control and making sure that you've got a business has a good handle on that. So you're talking the overheads, the employees, and we've already talked about resource and controlling that. And it's like you've said, have the good, honest conversations with people. A lot of people out there want more flexibility. Some people want to reduce hours. So, you have those conversations, come up with solutions as a business with your employees and involve them in the decision-making process, because what you want is those people behind you. At the end of the day, if you're going to come out of this, you need to have a strong workforce that's going to be behind the business. So the more you can involve the employees to look at cost savings, continuous improvement programs, bringing those costs down, making the business more efficient, but also looking at innovative ways of working. We don't all have to be in the office 5 days a week. We don't all have to be working 5 days a week. How can we become more flexible? People are now starting to see that they actually want to spend more time with the family and things like that. So it's looking at other ways of doing things, basically.
Actually, yeah, that's a brilliant point. It's treating it as an opportunity rather than a threat, to make it an opportunity to have some to open it up to your workforce and to get them involved in the planning of what they want to be doing moving forward, because work, as we found over the last year, has had to become more flexible. So a lot of businesses can potentially use it to their benefit to say, okay, well, if you're going to want to do 2 days a week, if there's a whole section of you who want to do that, then we aren't going to have to cut workforce. We're going to have to find different, not workarounds, but medium and long-term plans. If we go back to the short, medium and long-term thing that I alluded to earlier, medium and long-term plans to make sure that our already skilled workforce are in place, are motivated to want to come back in these sort of directions and these sort of opportunities.
Yeah, again, that kind of uncertainty. Roger, how do we think about, I'm a business owner, for example, and there's so much being thrown at us right now. We've got business interruptions. How are we to respond to rapid change? We're talking about lots of things here about people and supply chain, and how are business owners able to respond to this rapid change so quickly, do you think? What do they need to be doing?
Well, I think they need to think about planning what they want to do. I know in the time of crisis, there's the old adage, drain the swamp, so you identify the alligators. Continuous improvement is undoubtedly the way that people have to look. How do you get your costs out of your business? I think at the end, it's a situation where planning, check what you're doing, and make sure you action. But in terms of doing the planning, you need to bring the workforce into it as well. For small and medium companies, it's probably easier to bring the workers in and the workforce in to understand what is going on. More important, what needs to be done. Understanding your costs, absolutely correct. You need to understand your costs in minute detail. Costs are going up dramatically, and therefore that uncertainty of what it's going to cost you in 6 months' time is there. So again, making some provision for those costs going up, making provision for how people are going to work. And maybe in these times when we are working from home, although it's difficult sometimes to bring about innovation under those conditions, the continuous improvement process and the tools to do that need to be explained and developed with the workforce. That's a very powerful tool to bring down your costs. And I think that's the key. Plan, bring your workforce into it, and use the tools of continuous improvement of your business. The other side, of course, is talk to your customers. Make sure you understand what your customers are looking for and where do they think they're going. I think a typical industry to look at here is the aircraft industry. They have no idea what is going to happen over the next 3 years. So how do you plan? Well, they're planning for a minimum level production to keep their business ticking over, and they're working hard on continuous improvement to bring down their cost. And I think those maybe are the key elements. Bring your workforce in, talk to your customers to what they want, blend it together, and make sure at the end of the day you are improving your business by taking out cost.
Thanks, Roger. Nolene, we're talking about short, medium, long term. We're talking about rapid change and business disruptions. Do you think we're set up to do that sustainably through our build back and our resilience?
I think most companies aren't, and that's okay, because right now most companies are in survival mode. I think we have to, as this has been touched on by numerous of the number of members of the panel, it's about being realistic and pragmatic about what it is that needs to be done. And if we're, yes, champions of sustainability, we all want sustainability practices embedded into an organization. And we want for that to, for everyone to truly have an impact rather than, just what's reported and for optics. But organizations are in survival mode. They don't have the resources at times, or they're unsure if they have the resources to get through the months or the next, year. So thinking about sustainability practice isn't always at the forefront. And I think we have to be very realistic about this. There are some organizations where it's absolutely going to be something which they can leverage to be able to improve their processes, to be able to access more funding and to be able to be more profitable, because consumers are becoming more conscientious. There are more conscientious consumer decisions being made, and if a business fits into that space, then it's absolutely key for them to be focusing on sustainability practices. But that's not the case for all businesses. And I think one of the key things for every business owner to do is to take a step back and to think about, what is the strategy which is best going to work, not just for survival, but getting through this period and potentially getting to a position of thriving. What can be done now? What can be done soon? What can be done later? And what is realistic in terms of, what those applications are? And at every stage, bringing in considerations of, who your market is, what are the interdependencies with that, whether it's, international supply, production, whether it's dependent on, the financial position of who it is that your market is. And then looking at your workforce, is it appropriate, or at what levels is it appropriate for you to bring in the workforce to start to build in that, collaborative continuous improvement cycle, to look at the entrepreneurial models of collaboration internally, and start getting other stakeholders involved in looking at a sort of roadmap to success. So, I'd like for all organizations to get to a point where their practices are, sustainably focused. I'd like all organizations to have that embedded into their operations. We'd like continuous improvement to have that focus on sustainability. But the reality is that it's not feasible right now for all of them. And for now, it should be, what is possible to get over the initial hurdles? How do you bring in all stakeholders, including your workforce? And how do you plan for, including those sustainability practices as you develop and grow? And what can be done to leverage that positive impact?
Great, thanks, Naleen. Guy, we're here talking, we're asking lots of questions at the same time as giving answers. Is this all possible right now? Do you think? You've mentioned uncertainty several times, and I think we're asking questions at the same time as trying to answer them. And I guess at this stage of the conversation, I'm thinking, is it possible to build at the moment a plan around resilience? Are we still in a risky situation? Can we as business owners truly start to think about resilience and actions now?
I think there's one thing that I'm really certain of is that we don't have a choice. You have to build a plan, and you have to plan now. Going back to the short, medium and long term, you have to have all of those things in sharp focus. Because you can't not plan. I know it sounds really thick to say, but you can't not plan. You've got to have a strategy moving forward, but the strategy's got to have all sorts of different variables. There's your uncertainty within that certain part. It's got to have tons and tons of different variables. Will we go back into a tier system? Will we go back into lockdown? Will there be a spike in cases and certain places get locked down? These are all the uncertainties. If you go back to 20 years ago, it's like known knowns and unknown unknowns and everything in between. But the only certain thing is that we have to do something, because you can't just do nothing.
Yeah, Roger, I noticed you probably have an opinion on that one too.
Yeah, I think, as I said, and I agree totally, the situation is, in times of crisis, unfortunately, you have to stand back and plan. And unless you plan and prioritize, and then you use some of the tools of risk analysis to understand whether those risks are high, low, or medium, and then start putting your plan together, and then start introducing it to the workforce, introducing it and implementing it. Planning is key. It may be difficult, but unfortunately, that's the key to success.
Yeah, Ava, from your perspective, planning, you've got your own business again, so you plan and you have to worry about what might not happen and what might happen. How's that from your kind of side?
So I have, I will call it a survival plan and a thriving plan. So you always have to be ready to be surviving when things like this happen, but at the same time you cannot be on survival mode forever, so you have to plan for the longer term, and that's what really moves you forward as well. So yeah, it's having those two parallel plans, I think.
Yes, survival and revival. Zoe, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, planning, absolutely critical at the moment. And one of the things that I'm working on with businesses is one of the big things is the planning processes. And it's really important to have good planning processes in place more than ever. I think what happened pre this is businesses kind of understood like what they would get out at the end, and they never really had strong, robust planning processes in place. So it's become absolutely critical to have processes in place that where you're tracking those KPIs, you're really watching those KPIs, because once you've got a plan in place, you really need to be able to measure it and check whether you're on track, and then be able to react when you're not on track. And so one of the things I've been working with businesses more than ever, and businesses are really beginning to understand this, is how important it is to A, have a plan, but then B, be able to track that plan, and then have the processes in place or the reviews in place to be able to react to those plans. So set up formal business reviews, know exactly what you're tracking, and have decision-making processes. Businesses need to be able to make decisions very, very quickly at the moment. So you have to have the processes set up in place to be able to do that. So yeah, absolutely fundamental at the moment, planning
all the way. I think everyone's going to be getting their pens and papers out, and short, medium, long-term planning. So I guess to wrap up today's session, we can probably conclude on a question around, can the past guide your way for the future? We've had a terrible, in some cases, certainly in visitor economy, a terrible year. Are there any silver linings, Nolene, for letting the past guide your way for the future? Are there any silver linings to take away?
Yes, I do believe so. I think that this has left everyone almost forced into a position of creativity and thinking about how they can pivot. It's only when your back's up against a wall that you really are forced to think about things in a different way. And very often those different ways can improve your processes. So I think, yes, the lessons from the past, a lot of organizations have learned where they might have been overspending, processes that were unnecessary, ways of working which weren't actually required, and have been forced to cut back, but also have determined ways in which they're able to pivot, have learned how they can do things differently and better, and forced to look at different opportunities. And I also think that with every difficulty that businesses, society, and indeed the economy faces, there are also numerous opportunities which are presented for new business concepts and ideas as well that then start to fill in those gaps. So I think that is the silver lining. It's forcing people to reconsider, to pivot, to look at opportunities.
Opportunity. Guy, silver linings, letting the past guide your future. Any silver linings from you?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is to more than ever have contingencies, and to have, as Ava said, to have a survive plan and a thrive plan, and not just to go beyond a survive plan as well, to have just this, okay, shutdown plan. What happens if this happens again? That's one of the best ways that people can learn from this, because there were a few weeks warning of what was going to happen just over a year ago. But that wasn't long enough for an awful lot of businesses to plan contingency. And a lot of smaller businesses don't actually have time to do that sort of contingency planning, but they now know that they need to.
Ava, survival and thrive is certainly going to be one of the themes taken away. Your silver linings from the last year?
We'll need to reacted to it, to ensure we plan accordingly. But yeah, being on innovative collaboration, I think those two will be key as silver lining.
Great. Roger, any silver linings in the international world?
I think out of every situation that we as humans face, there is the opportunity to improve for the future. And I think businesses are looking at it as to how they will survive. I think the planning, as we've said, is key. Maybe 1 or 2 plans to make sure you can survive. But I think there is a silver lining, and that is that ultimately we will be stronger in the end because we'll remove a lot of the waste that we have in the business climate. And we will have a situation where the world climate will improve. We've seen the situation where you can listen to the birds. We haven't got aircraft flying above. So I think we've all recognized that there are benefits from what we've learned in this pandemic, which will be applied, I think, in the longer term to planning our business future.
Great, thanks. And Zoe, any silver linings from you?
Yes, I think that as people, we've become more connected, and I really believe that we've businesses have been led with more empathy at the moment and more compassion, and leaders are certainly considering their employees and their welfare, and it feels a bit like we've all been through this together, and we've all been shook up, and it's hit us whether you're the CEO of a business or whether you're on the shop floor. We've all been affected by this, and internationally, we've all been affected. Where we used to kind of see differences between countries, we now understand that we're all in this together, and we've all been through this together. So I really believe that people have started to look at their core values, and it's actually brought people together, and I hope that will be a big improvement for the future, and people working together. So yeah, that's mine.
Great, some optimism there. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed the session. Thank you to my panel for joining, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to how you can make your business more resilient for the future. All the best. Thank you.